Let us offer our consecration to the Lord. Lord, we offer up to you this day, and we ask that you glorify your name through us. We ask that all we do may, especially during this week, bear fruit in our service to you, bear fruit in our knowledge of you, bear fruit in our ability to glorify your name in all we do. And we ask this through Christ our Lord. You know, I had an experience a long time ago when I first went to the seminary, and actually this is when I was visiting the seminary to see what it was like, and I was in high school then, and it's kind of interesting. It was just before I left the church. I mean, not literally the day before, but within probably several months, I left the church. I left the church in high school, and I came back while I was in the Navy, of all places, and that's a different story in itself. But and maybe I'll do this sideline just to show you how you can believe a lot of stuff that you may see in the media and stuff. I didn't know they had churches in California when I went to California. Of course, I just didn't know. I'm like, they have churches in California? And I had been away from the church, and I was actually walking down the street. I was in Ocean Beach, California, which is a part of San Diego. Beautiful place. And I think it was Sacred Heart. I don't remember the exact name of the church. But anyway, it was a church in Ocean Beach, California. And I'm like, there's a church here. And a Catholic church, no less. So I was surprised. It shows you how naive you can get when you really don't get out in the real world. So anyway, but this was before all that, and I was in high school. I guess it was in high school, must have been. And I was going up for retreat in the seminary, at the seminary college. And I remember my father dropped me off, and we went in for a few minutes, and I said, "Are you worried about the car being stolen?" And he said, "If the car would be stolen here, it would be stolen anywhere." Of course, being the statement in the seminary. Now, the parking lot was across the street from it's on Foster Street. So across the street from what was called St. Clement's Hall. And it's just as you get into, it's now owned by Boston College, but it's on Foster Street anyway. It's right across the street. So, and I don't know if it's still there. The parking lot's still there. Well, sure enough, my first year in the seminary, of course, this is like, got to be 10 years later, 15 years later. My first year in the seminary, it turns out one of the guys had his car stolen. And I was then a Navy veteran. He was an Air Force veteran. Had his car stolen. So, your expectations may not match reality. Now, why am I telling that story that seems to have absolutely nothing to do with any of the readings or anything we're doing today? Well, it's really simple. Because today's reading focuses on the failures of two of Jesus' disciples at the Last Supper. You know who I'm going to refer to. It is Judas and it is Peter. Now, you may not know, according to the Council of Trent, Judas is in hell. People say, well, the church has never declared anyone formally in hell. Yes, they have. One person. That's from the Council of Trent. Now, I don't want to go down there. I want arguments over that and everything else. I'm just saying that's what the Council of Trent teaches. But the reason is not because he betrayed Jesus. The reason is he went into despair and felt he could not be forgiven. And that's what is taught by the Council of Trent. So that's an important thing to look at, because we do understand, this is an important message. Probably one of the worst messages you can understand about the church is exactly the one that my father just happened to say, is if it's going to happen here, it's going to happen everywhere. In other words, that somehow the church is by default protected from human failure. That is a very, very bad message, because it's not true. And it wasn't true among Jesus' own disciples. We know two of his disciples failed him miserably. One of them eventually repents, but the other one, according to tradition, doesn't. And we also understand it was their own humanness, that they're not getting in touch with God, that prevented them from seeing the reality. One of them eventually does see it, the other one doesn't. And that is the case of Judas. Now, what's happening with Judas? Judas has specific expectations of the Messiah, and Jesus is not meeting his expectations. That is always a major spiritual issue. It's an issue for us today. When we expect, if Jesus is who he says he is, then X, Y, and Z is going to happen. So naturally, if Jesus, who he says he is, then he wouldn't be crucified on a cross, is naturally a way we'd think of it if we were living back then, which is exactly the story of the disciples on their way to Emmaus. But in Judas's case, if Jesus who he says he is, and Judas believed that he was coming to overthrow the Romans, then he would be putting together a powerful army so he could overthrow the Romans and bring sovereign independence back to Judah. And he doesn't seem to be doing that. Therefore, Jesus cannot possibly be who he says he is. And that's why Judas betrays him, only to discover, unfortunately, that he was wrong, that in his mind, that Jesus has had to match a certain template. And because he didn't match that template, Judas rejected him, and that's why he went and for the 30 pieces of silver, he betrayed him. But we see that reality. It is, if Jesus who he says he is, this is who he's got to be. And anytime we think along those ways, especially in regards to God or the church, we run into some pretty serious problems, as did Judas. We're going to talk on the other side of the break. You're listening to St. Anthony Overnight from St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts, right here on WEZE. Remember, our website is CatholicAudiomedia.com, where you can connect to the parish, St. Anthony in Allston, Massachusetts. You can listen to the program. You can connect to other platforms that offer our programs. You can send me input to share your thoughts on the readings. You can send feedback, questions, ideas for the program. You can also donate to the show. There is so much you can do at CatholicAudiomedia.com. And you can also write to us if you'd like. Our address can be found there, and I can tell you what it is too. St. Anthony Parish, 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. That's St. Anthony Parish, 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. And don't forget, you have a standing invitation to attend Mass in our parish at 10 o'clock a.m. on Sundays at St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts. I want to call your attention to Catholic TV, which offers great faith-filled, family-friendly programming 24 hours a day. You can find your cable channel at www.getcatholictv.com, and you can watch online on the free apps or check out the YouTube channel. Daily Mass, Rosaries, the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and the Our Lady of Perpetual Help Novena are all available online and on demand. Check out CatholicTV.com. And don't forget, you can watch Catholic TV to see what the events going on at the Archdiocese level this Holy Week, including the Chrism Mass, which you can watch on Catholic TV starting at 11 o'clock today. And check out CatholicTV.com to find out all the events going on for Holy Week this week. So we're talking about that whole understanding of how Jesus does not meet our expectations. Well, in the case of Judas, and therefore Judas turns away from Jesus. And the church can at times not meet our expectations. Oh, can at times, can it ever? As we all know. And then we can turn around and do what Judas did and say, well, then obviously this isn't who he says he is. And we can say the same, well, obviously the church isn't what we assumed it to be. Well, we're going to talk about that, but I want to talk about Peter for a second. Now, Peter is the opposite. He expects himself to be someone he is not. So he considers himself obviously above the temptation to cower, to be afraid, because he is so strong in his faith, and he is the first one who falls, because he has a misunderstanding of who he himself is. So he repents because he comes to face with who he truly is. And this becomes a deepening of his relationship with Jesus. So you have the two. One who sees Jesus differently than Jesus actually is, and because of that he rejects him. The other one who misunderstands who he is, he himself is, and his own ability to be a follower of Jesus, and he denies him. So we see those two at the same time. One of the things I wanted to bring up as well is what I was just talking about. If God existed, then obviously the world would be different. And you know what I thought of? I thought of the Big W. Now, if you've never seen the movie, It's a Mad World, you may not understand what I'm talking about. The whole focus on It's a Mad World, which is a great movie, is the Big W. They're looking for a treasure that is buried under the Big W. Now, I don't want to give too much away about what the Big W is, but they get to where the Big W is supposed to be, and it's Jimmy Durante plays this guy who buried this treasure, and it's a long story. And he's dying from a car crash, and as he's dying, it's a comedy movie, by the way, as he's dying, he says, the treasure is buried at such and such, I forgot the name of the park, it might have been MacArthur Park for all I know, under the Big W. So when they get to this park in Los Angeles, they're looking for the Big W, and they can't find it, and the camera fades back, and you see that there are these 4 palm trees that make this huge W, right? And it was real. They're not there anymore, so I've heard, but that's the Big W, but they can't find it because they're not looking big enough. And I think that's the same thing with the church, because people are saying if God existed, then the world would be different and the church would be different. But what does our church teach? And what does our faith teach? That we have an inclination to sin. So if we do not focus ourselves on God, if we do not listen to God, and not just listen, I mean really develop that faith with God, and we really have that daily experience with God, that that prayer life, that giving ourselves over to the Lord, that whole thing that's a part of us, then we end up falling into sin of all different types. Listen as I'm going. I'm trying to put this together so you can understand it. And that falling into sin proves what is being taught in our faith. That's that original sin. That's the inclination to sin. So the Big W for us is not obviously the 4 trees. It is, you prove to me that God exists. Well, wait a minute. You've turned around and said God exists, does not exist. We don't need God anymore. And now we're in the midst of a war. How does that not match exactly what our understanding of our relationship with God is? And you can see that's our Big W. When we aren't in touch with the Lord, our world goes severely wrong. And that for us is our Big W. We're going to talk more tomorrow on Spy Wednesday. Have yourself a blessed day. En Cristo vivimos.